Hi everybody, I hope that you're all doing really well. So today I am back to talk about the books that I read in the first half of January 2021, as well as to talk about a few of the books that I am currently reading because, to be honest, when it comes to finishing books, not really done much of that this month, but I have technically been reading a lot. It's just, as you will see, there is a reason that I've not finished those books yet. First off, to get the obvious currently reading book out of the way, I am currently partway through Les Miserables by Victor Hugo, which is part of our Les Mis read-along that is continuing from January through to March, or however long it takes us to read this, to be honest. At the current moment in time, I have just finished part 1, Fantine, and I'm about to start part 2, Cosette. We are roughly trying to work through this at a rate of around about 2 books a month, so having just finished part 1, I am right on track, and I really enjoyed the process of rereading this first part. However, I do know from our Discord server that there have been some mixed reviews of part 2, and I think it's mainly because it is in part 2, Cosette, that Victor Hugo does tend to go on some fairly lengthy digressions. The first one that I remember, which is of the Battle of Waterloo, that's what I've got to look forward to next, so I'm a bit like, let's see how we go. And then the second one is around about chapter 6 or 7, where he's talking quite extensively about the Parisian convents and the history surrounding the convents, and yeah, we'll see how we go. But I feel like morale had been quite high for Les Mis up until people got to part 2, and now they're just, I feel like a mutiny is coming, and I'm trying to keep everybody's spirits up, so it's fine. We'll get through this part, And then first up, for a book that I have actually finished this month, we have British on Race, Identity and Belonging by Afwa Hirsch. This book is kind of an in-between genres book. It is part memoir, part just general non-fiction reporting on what it is like to grow up black in the UK. So in the memoir section, we are dealing with Afwa Hirsch's experiences growing up mixed race. Her father being white, but whose grandfather was a German Jew who ended up fleeing Germany just before the Second World War broke out. And then her mother, who was Ghanaian. She was brought up in quite a privileged environment in Wimbledon. She went to private school, she went to Oxford, and because of this upbringing, she had many opportunities that came her way. However, she notes that she was almost always the only non-white person in most of the environments she grew up in, and as a result, her sense of identity was always kind of lacking. She never felt like she was quite accepted as a British citizen. As a result, when she left education, she thought it was really important for her to go back to her roots, to go back to Ghana. But there she felt just as conspicuous, not feeling like she was quite Ghanaian enough. She is very self-conscious that her experience does not match up for everybody's, and particularly she compares herself to her partner Sam, who grew up in Tottenham and who had very strong ties to his African heritage through his community, but who had noticeably fewer privileges and opportunities that she had. Everything that he achieved in his life was not handed to him by his parents, but because he worked for it, he was very much what we would term a self-made man. And a strong theme that is running through this is kind of that dynamic between like actual tangible privileges and opportunities versus maybe not having that, but having a strong sense of identity, a confidence, a self-assuredness in yourself and in your heritage, which Afwa always felt like she never quite had. And I feel like as far as that part of the memoir goes, you know, it's not quite complete, and I don't think for Afwa Hirsch it ever will be quite complete. It's something that by the end she is still very much mulling over and trying to work out. But then alongside that, we've also got the general non-fiction reporting on various aspects of what it is like to grow up black in Britain. And there are so many topics discussed in here. The topic of beauty, of how we talk about our history, particularly how we as British people do not really like to mention the slightly grislier aspects of our history, particularly and most especially when it comes to talking about the slave trade and our involvement in it. And I think for me, especially as a former history student, like that topic of how we approach our history like really landed for me. I think my favourite section of this comes right towards the end. But we do need to find a British response to our uniquely British history. The debate over what version of history should be preserved and taught only goes to show how important, how powerful narratives of history are in shaping identity. I've yet to find a British person who has no pride or interest in British history, in Shakespeare, in the engineering feats of the Victorians, in the Beatles or David Bowie. So I find it remarkable when people assume that the worst excesses of racism are in the past now and that it is time to move on. No one says, get over the Second World War, because even as increasingly there are fewer people alive who remember it, it shaped our national identity as well as our geopolitical reality. No one says Shakespeare is in the past, because his work is part of Britain's narrative. It has become part of what Britain is. Even if you wanted to put Shakespeare behind you, it would be virtually impossible, since his legacy is embedded into every corner of British literature, language, drama and culture. And if it's impractical to put Shakespeare behind you, then it's even more difficult to get over the ideas enshrined by monarchs, governments, businesses, banks and even some of our favourite brands that black people are inferior, that they have to prove their worth or their beauty, their intellect or their honesty, that only good immigrants are acceptable and that white British people get to be the judge. It's harder to get over these these ideas, because not only are they pervasive, but we still won't face up to them. I thought this book was really, really fantastic, really thought-provoking and incredibly informative, and yes, you definitely should read it. Next up, we have The Betrayals by Bridgette Collins. I picked this up after absolutely loving The Binding by Bridgette Collins a couple of years ago, and I'm really, really glad that I read it, and I did generally enjoy this, but I feel like I have a lot more, like, tangled up thoughts about this. This story mainly follows the character of Leo Martin, who is a politician who ends up being banished after he hasn't quite towed the party line, after he has made certain comments in certain speeches where he kind of criticises some of the party's policies. It's made very, very clear that the party that he is working for is pretty corrupt, and he knows that his choice is either that he will be killed or he has to go along with the banishment that his party have set out for him. And they decide to banish him to his old learning place of Montvert Academy, which is an academy that prepares its students to learn and perform the grand jeu, which is not fully explained in the text. You're kind of like picking it up as you go along, but it is kind of a game, kind of composition, kind of musical religious worship, kind of a bit of like philosophy via music. He is struck by how much things have changed, including the fact that the new Magister Ludi, the teacher of the game, is a woman, Claire Dryden, the first woman to teach the grand jeu, which is remarkable in itself because women are not allowed at Montvert. So immediately there is a little bit of mystery here of how on earth did this woman learn to play this game. We read this story from the perspective of the adult Leo Martin. We also follow the perspective of Claire herself, as well as following diary entries of Leo's from when he was younger and studying at Montvert, as well as a mysterious character called the Rat, who pops up fairly infrequently throughout the story. And I feel like this was an interesting read for me as a previous lover of The Binding, because that was a book that I absolutely loved. However, I feel like reading this has kind of cemented for me why it is that I think other people may not have loved The Binding previously, because I think there are a lot of characteristic elements of Bridgette Collins' writing style that come across in here that I didn't take issue with really, but kind of made me think, this will be a bit of a Marmite book. I don't think everybody's gonna like this. When I started reading this, I was very much comparing it back and forth to The Binding, because I think there are a lot of similarities between the two books. Not necessarily in terms of plot, but in terms of like larger themes. It's not the same story copy and pasted, but there are definitely themes that she goes back to within this book. Without wanting to spoil things too much, there is definitely like an enemies to lovers trope that carries through from The Binding into here. Both books are very character focused. They are focused on alternate histories. Themes of corruption, of religion, of class differences are covered in both books, as well as the fact that in both books you are presented with quite an unclear and quite unexplained society. I feel like it's kind of clear that Bridgette Collins understands the world that she's created, but she kind of doesn't explain it for you, and I think that is quite deliberate. There are no big like info dumpy passages in here which kind of set up the world for you and explain it for you. You are basically dumped into these worlds and expected to follow it along and pick up bits and pieces as you go, which I feel like for some readers they will absolutely hate that. If you are somebody who loves your world building and wants to know what kind of world you're living in, this might not be the book for you, because I think Bridgette Collins' books are very much focused on the character experience. These characters and their mental journeys and their interactions with each other are much more important, and everything else is kind of in the background, which I actually think kind of works with how we live our own lives. There are lots of things going on, but we don't focus on them quite as much as maybe we should, because we are much focused in ourselves and in what other people closest to us are doing. But if you are somebody who likes your stories to be very clear and neatly wrapped up, this is not gonna quite do that with you. But Bridgette Collins kind of builds up these like quite complex, very corrupted worlds, and then through the course of the story, nothing is really done to fix them. There are lots of threads that are left dangling in both of her books, which I think would probably annoy quite a lot of people. If you want a story that is very neatly wrapped up, you're not going to get it with her books. But then who would these books be perfect for? Like I say, if you are very much into your character focused books like I am, then definitely give this a go. If you're into dark academia, I certainly recommend giving this a go. You've got that definitely here. There's a lot of conversation kind of bubbling away in the background about corrupt governments and how we behave towards these corrupt governments when it doesn't directly affect us. How we let injustices build up over time and we only start to intervene when it does affect our own lives. I think definitely if you are a fan of dystopias, especially 1984, then you might want to kind of give this a go and see if it's for you. If you are okay with like quite pretentious, often quite unlikable characters, if that's not going to bother you, then definitely give this a go, because you're going to get that aplenty in here. And like I say, if you are okay with not having the world that you are reading about completely explained to you, then yeah, give it a go. If you've been interested, give it a go. Like I say, I really enjoyed reading this. I'm glad that I've picked it up, but I don't think I love it quite as much as I did The Binding. I feel like that was a slightly tighter story. I had a lot less gripes with it, and especially with where certain plot elements went. There's a big reveal at the end of this, which I'm still kind of wrapping my head around whether or not I liked that reveal or not. But like I say, give it a try. see if it's for you. But yeah, those were the only 2 books that I actually managed to finish in January. Like I say, I have kind of plodded along with Les Mis and I'm really enjoying it, but let's take a look at some of the other books that I'm currently reading. I'm currently listening on audiobook to The White Ship by Charles Spencer. This was one of the books that was on my 2021 TBR video of all the backlist books that I really want to get to, and I'm really enjoying it so far. I picked it up especially after having read Matilda, Empress, Queen, Warrior earlier last year and really enjoying that. I'm enjoying being back in 11th and 12th century England and kind of fleshing out more of like the background to the White Ship disaster and to the anarchy. Though I will say I definitely think I prefer Matilda, Empress, Queen, Warrior to this, purely because I think I much prefer biographies and I much prefer like linking back to a figure, to a character, rather than leading back to an event. Everything is building up towards the White Ship and everything is working around that disaster. But I feel like because of that there are so many different things that you can talk about when it comes to English society in the 12th century. So Charles Spencer is kind of like working a little bit over here and a little bit over here, whereas when it comes to the Matilda biography, you know, you always have to link it back to Matilda, which gives a parameter for Catherine Halley to work under that is set. Whereas I don't feel like there is quite so firm a parameter set with Charles Spencer because he's just leading up to this one event and the things that happened around it. But I don't feel like that's really a criticism, that is just really a personal preference for me. I've said it before, I'll say it again, I'm much more of a character focused reader, and I think that's why biography really works for me, because you do have that like much more tailored focus on a person and their personality and the things that happened around them. But I am really enjoying The White Ship. It's really fun to come back to this history. As well as that, I'm currently reading Ethelred the Unready, The Failed King by Richard Abels. This is the second in the Penguin Monarch series, and I did quite a good job at the beginning of the year of getting through this. I'm currently on page 24. I seem to have halted, I think mainly because I was trying to get my allocated pages for Les Mis done each day. So this has gone on the back burner, but I have got my like little Word document up with my script for whenever it is that I do manage to finish this and I do my next installment of the Penguin Monarchs videos. It is on the way. I'm really enjoying it. I'm enjoying it a lot more than I thought that I would. Like I've said before, I'm not a massive early medievalist, so the fact that I am getting some enjoyment out of this it all points to good things. As always, I'm trekking along through A Poem for Every Winter Day by Ali Asiri. Part of me is feeling like I need to stop buying these because I do end up like putting off reading my poem and then suddenly I've got like 2 weeks worth of poems to read, which makes me feel like maybe I shouldn't pick up the spring and summer versions, but like now I've started picking these up, I feel like I have to keep going, but we'll see. And then I've also got Troy by Stephen Fry, which I am slowly but surely making my way through. I'm up to page 96, 97 so far, and we've not quite hit the Trojan War yet. We are still very much in like the preamble, the build up to that big event. I think part of the reason I'm going so slowly through this is that when I was reading Mythos and Heroes, I was also listening a little bit to the audiobook. I'd like read a bit and then listen to a bit, and I don't have an audiobook of this yet. My library audiobook app has not downloaded this and I really want it because I love hearing Stephen Fry's voice. And I think it's purely that I'm missing that, not that there's anything wrong with this book. But you've got Stephen Fry's trademark humour and wit, and yeah, I am enjoying it. I'm just going a lot slower than I'd like to. But yes, those are all of the books that I have finished so far in January and that I am currently reading. Do let me know if you've read any of these books and let me know about any of the books that you finished in January. I'd love to hear from you. I hope that you are having a fantastic, fantastic day and I look forward to talking to you again soon. Thanks. Bye.